CNN, you will hear what jurors will hear one day. The recording was made 2 summers ago, July 2021, at the former president's club in Bedminster, New Jersey. You will clearly hear the former president as he is speaking to several people. According to the special counsel's indictment, they include a writer working on Mark Meadows' memoir, the publisher, and 2 of Trump's staff members. The president was aware he was being recorded. This is the first time it is being played publicly.
Okay. So imagine you're sitting inside a federal courtroom watching special counsel Jack Smith present what everyone assumes will be another standard moment in the classified documents case against Trump. You're expecting the familiar routine. Prosecutors arguing, defense attorneys objecting, the judge handling procedural issues. Nothing out of the ordinary. And then everything shifts. Smith plays an audio recording from a 2021 meeting at Trump's Bedminster Golf Club. As the tape rolls, you can hear Trump himself discussing classified documents about U.S. military plans involving Iran with people who have no security clearance at all. These aren't officials, they're civilians. And then comes the line that changes everything. Trump says, clearly and unmistakably, "Now I can't declassify." That single sentence completely shatters his entire defense. It destroys the claim that he somehow declassified documents by thinking about it or by taking them when he left office. The courtroom reportedly goes silent as the weight of that admission sinks in. This is Trump, in his own voice, acknowledging the documents are still classified while showing them anyway to unauthorized people. This isn't circumstantial evidence or testimony that can be spun. It's a textbook smoking gun. Trump's own words on tape confessing to the very conduct he's denied for years. Reports say the judge looks visibly stunned as the implications become clear, while prosecutors struggle to contain their reaction as this devastating evidence is formally entered into the permanent court record. This is the kind of thing you need to know. That's my role with this channel. But first, take a look at this.
Caitlin, first of all, what do you make? This is the first time we are hearing this audio. We'd seen a transcript. There's more in this audio than we actually had seen, I think, in the transcript. What stands out to you?
Yeah, there is more in this. And this is a 2-minute clip of what a recording that we're told is over an hour long. But this is, of course, the part that is at the center of Jack Smith's investigation. And we knew about this. CNN first reported that this existed and that Jack Smith's prosecution had it in their hands. But to hear it, I think, really just drives home and it undercuts everything that Trump has been saying. I mean, even as of a few days ago, he was saying there was no document per se. But you can hear him very clearly in there referencing something in his hands.
All right, let's break down what this Bedminster audio actually shows and why it is so devastating for Trump's legal posture in the classified documents case. Because this is not some vague rumor or a secondhand account you can wave away. This is the kind of evidence that lands with a thud in a courtroom, the kind that forces even your most loyal defenders to stop talking for a second and just stare at the floor. The recording is from a July 2021 meeting at Trump's New Jersey Golf Club after he left office. He's meeting with writers and people tied to a book project, civilians with no clearances and no need to know access to national defense information. And yet, on this tape, Trump is essentially showing off. He pulls out documents related to potential U.S. military action against Iran, and he talks through them like trophies, describing military planning and options that were considered. Then comes the line that nukes his entire public defense strategy. On the tape, you can hear Trump make the admission that these documents are still classified and that he no longer has the authority to declassify them because he is out of office. The "now I can't declassify" statement is legal dynamite. Why? Because it directly undercuts the story Trump and his allies have been selling for months, that he declassified everything automatically, instantly, telepathically, by thinking about it, or by simply taking documents with him when he left the White House. If that were true, this line would not exist. It only exists if he understands the documents remain classified and he understands he no longer has the power to change that status. And that matters, because the legal fight is not only about possession, it is about knowledge and intent. When someone is caught on tape acknowledging the documents are classified, acknowledging they cannot declassify them anymore, and still discussing them with people who have no clearance, you are not looking at a misunderstanding. You are looking at consciousness. You are looking at awareness. You are looking at willfulness. It is also the kind of moment prosecutors dream about because it is not a witness you can smear as biased. It is not an interpretation of events. It is the defendant's own voice doing the work for you. And here is where the political reality kicks in. Trump's team wants this case to feel like abstract process. They want it to feel like procedural nonsense, like paperwork disputes, like the deep state harassing him. But audio like this collapses that entire fog machine. It makes it concrete. It makes it visceral. It makes it easy for regular people to understand what is happening without needing a law degree. And, well, I couldn't miss the chance to ask you to subscribe to our channel. If you want to receive breaking news and stay informed about what the mainstream media doesn't tell you, this is the right place. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. It helps us a lot to keep bringing high-quality content to you. Thank you. And continuing, now, the Bedminster tape is only the first wave, because what Jack Smith presents alongside it is what turns this from one damaging moment into an entire evidence avalanche. According to the reporting and the way this evidence is being framed in court, prosecutors also have testimony from Yushil Taveras, the IT administrator at Mar-a-Lago, who allegedly flipped and began cooperating after initially lying in a way that protected Trump. And this is where things stop being embarrassing and start becoming structurally deadly from a legal standpoint. Because Taveras is not some random observer. He is the person with access to the security camera systems, the person who can speak to what footage existed, what was requested, and what was done to it. And the allegation here is not minor. The allegation is that after Trump's lawyers received a subpoena demanding preservation of evidence related to classified document storage and handling, Taveras was ordered to delete relevant security camera footage. That is not oops. That is not clerical error. That is textbook obstruction territory, because the entire point of a subpoena preservation demand is to stop exactly that. Do not destroy evidence. Preserve it. If you respond to that by trying to delete footage that would show the movement of boxes containing classified material, prosecutors do not have to stretch the story. The story writes itself. And if the person who actually handled the system is now describing who gave the orders and when, it becomes incredibly hard for Trump to claim this was innocent miscommunication. Because obstruction is often proven through timing. The closer the acts of deletion and concealment are to the legal demand to preserve materials, the clearer the inference of intent becomes. Then there's another layer that is so corrosive it bleeds into everything else Trump touches legally. The lawyer confession that prosecutors present, the idea that Trump's own attorney admitted under oath to rigging evidence or manipulating the evidence environment in this case. Even if you strip away the sensational framing, the core implication is catastrophic. It suggests an organized approach to hiding, shaping, or tampering with the evidentiary record. And once a court believes that, you do not just lose one argument. You lose credibility. You lose the presumption that your legal team is acting in good faith. Courts normally give lawyers a baseline trust because lawyers are officers of the court. But when evidence surfaces that a lawyer helped rig the record, judges begin treating every submission from that team as suspect. That is the difference between a tough case and a nearly unwinnable one. This is why the judge's reaction matters so much in the narrative. If the judge establishes a presumption of bad faith, it flips the normal dynamic. Trump's team no longer gets the benefit of the doubt. They have to prove they are not playing games, which is a brutal position to be in when your entire strategy has been delay, attack, and fog. And this is where the crime-fraud exception enters. Attorney-client privilege is one of the strongest protections in American law. But it has a built-in escape hatch because privilege is not meant to be a shield for criminal planning. If communications between lawyer and client are made in furtherance of a crime, like obstruction or evidence destruction, a judge can pierce privilege. So if the court finds there is enough evidence of obstruction to trigger the crime-fraud exception, prosecutors can suddenly access communications between Trump and his legal team that would normally be untouchable. Not summaries, not redacted fragments, full communications, unredacted, the kind of material that can prove direct involvement and intent. And notice what that does to Trump's broader defense posture. For months, Trump's strategy has depended on insulation. He wants to hide behind lawyers. He wants to hide behind staff. He wants to imply he did not personally order anything, that everything was confusion, that everything was handled by others. Crime-fraud exception rulings erase that buffer. They give prosecutors the path to show who knew what, who directed what, and how the decisions were framed internally. Now zoom out and look at how prosecutors are connecting this to a pattern. They are not presenting Bedminster as a one-off slip. They are not presenting the alleged deletions as a single rogue move. They are painting a picture of systematic defiance, a political and legal posture where legal requirements are treated as optional if they interfere with what Trump wants. That is where the references to over 700 blocked executive orders become more than trivia. Whether that number is being used rhetorically or as a framed pattern, the point is clear. Prosecutors want to show a consistent approach to governance and compliance, an approach that treats courts as obstacles to bulldoze rather than constraints to respect. Pattern evidence matters because it can help prove intent and absence of mistake. It is the difference between "I did not realize" and "I always do this when I want something." Then come the contempt referrals. When a judge issues contempt referrals against officials, it signals the court believes there were deliberate violations of court orders or deliberate obstruction of the judicial process. That is not normal courtroom scolding. That is escalation. It is the court saying, this is serious enough that prosecution and punishment should be considered. And that is the moment the game changes. Trump has lived for years in a political culture where consequences are delayed, diluted, or turned into fundraising. But contempt referrals, privilege piercing, and potential arrest consequences are not PR problems. They are concrete legal pressure. You cannot spin your way out of court enforcement if the court is determined to enforce. Now, connect that to the revival of the 37-count indictment. A key point in this whole saga is that dismissals on procedural grounds are not vindication. A procedural dismissal is not a judge saying he did not commit crimes. It is a judge addressing issues like appointment authority, jurisdiction, or process. If those appointment issues are resolved or relitigated, prosecutors can bring back the full scope, including willful retention of national defense information, conspiracy to obstruct, false statements, and more. And prosecutors are not bringing it back empty-handed. They are bringing it back with more. Cooperating witnesses, alleged deletion orders, lawyer admissions, and expanded access to communications if privilege is pierced. That is why this is so crushing. Now, the legal significance of the Bedminster tape ties directly into the elements prosecutors must prove under espionage-related statutes, especially 18 U.S.C. 793. You have to prove the information is national defense-related, that it was possessed without authorization, that the defendant knew what it was, and that the defendant willfully retained or disclosed it instead of returning it as required. Defense lawyers often fight the knowledge element. They argue their client did not realize it was classified, did not understand the sensitivity, did not know the status. But the Bedminster tape obliterates that. Trump says it. He acknowledges the status. He acknowledges the lack of authority. That is exactly what prosecutors need to show knowledge. And it also destroys the declassification fantasy defense. If Trump truly believed he had already declassified the Iran documents, he would not be saying, now I can't declassify. That statement only makes sense if he knows the documents remain classified. That is why prosecutors call it smoking gun evidence. Not because it is dramatic, but because it nails multiple elements at once. It is admissions against interest. It is awareness and conduct fused together in one piece of audio. Then you add the obstruction theory. If Tavares testifies that deletion requests came after a subpoena demanded preservation, prosecutors can argue aggravated obstruction. The timing suggests conscious guilt, conscious defiance of legal process. And if the deletions were targeted, not routine maintenance that further supports intent, then the lawyer confession aspect creates an even bigger issue. It contaminates trust. If one lawyer admits to evidence manipulation, it gives prosecutors grounds to investigate other evidence handling, to demand forensic checks, to question whether declarations filed in court were accurate. It also pushes the judge towards stronger enforcement because the court cannot rely on representations from a team suspected of bad faith. That is why crime fraud exception rulings are so devastating. They open a treasure, chest of communications that prosecutors normally cannot touch. They can reveal planning discussions, cover up instructions, strategy to evade compliance. If those communications exist, the case becomes even more direct. Now, put this into the political timing. If Trump is trying to govern in a second term while this evidence is being aired publicly, it becomes a constant drain. Every day this case dominates, the news is a day policy cannot dominate. Every time the tape is discussed is a day the public is reminded of misconduct allegations tied to national security. And that has downstream political consequences. Prosecutors do not need to win the election. They need to win the case. But politicians do need to face voters. If voters are watching a president entangled in evidence of classified document mishandling and obstruction allegations, it creates a brutal environment for Republican candidates going into 2026. Attack ads become effortless. You play the tape. You ask one question. Is this acceptable? The impeachment and removal conversation also becomes sharper. If House members pursue impeachment, public evidence matters. A tape played in open court is usable. Witness testimony in open court is usable. Judicial findings of bad faith and obstruction are usable. That makes it easier to build political cases, not just legal ones. Then there's the 25th Amendment chatter. Even if it remains theoretical, the idea is simple. If a president is so consumed by legal jeopardy, and if the evidence appears overwhelming, you can imagine political actors debating capacity and duty. Whether that happens is political, but the fact it is imaginable shows how destabilizing this becomes. Now, the national security dimension is arguably the most serious part, even beyond politics. If Trump was casually showing military planning documents related to Iran to civilians, those documents likely contain highly sensitive details. not just plans, but sources and methods, assessments, capabilities, vulnerabilities, operational options. The kind of information foreign intelligence services would kill to understand. Every person in that room becomes a potential target for exploitation. Every disclosure becomes a potential leak vector. And that is why this is not a petty scandal. It is not just embarrassing. It is potentially long-lasting damage. Even if nothing was photographed or copied, the act itself is a breach of the responsibility presidents hold over classified materials. Now, the precedent matters too. For decades, there has been a gray assumption that presidents face political consequences more than criminal ones. If a former president can be convicted for willful retention and obstruction tied to classified materials, it establishes that criminal accountability is real, even at that level. And that changes behavior in the future, at least in theory. But it also creates chaos now, because the system is not built for a sitting president fighting a case like this with evidence this direct. If trials proceed, the time demands are enormous. Court appearances, lawyer prep, constant media cycles. It becomes difficult to govern, and it also increases pressure on allies. If prosecutors pursue charges against those tied to obstruction, people will start choosing themselves over Trump. We have already seen that pattern in other cases across American politics. Cooperating witnesses flip when they face real prison time. The moment loyalty costs years of your life, loyalty collapses. That creates a cascade. One cooperator implicates another. More people face risk, more people cooperate. And that is where Trump's legal position becomes not just bad, but structurally boxed in. You have his own voice on tape. You have alleged testimony from a key IT administrator about deletions. You have lawyer admissions. You have privilege piercing that could expose direct communications. You have judicial enforcement tools like contempt. You have revived indictments with multiple counts. This is why the hopeless framing emerges. Not because prosecutors always win. They do not. But because when you stack evidence types like this, it becomes extremely difficult to craft a plausible alternative explanation that covers all of it at once. You can argue bias. You can argue politics. You can shout a witch hunt, but you cannot unhear a tape. You cannot erase sworn testimony. You cannot pretend privilege-piercing orders do not exist. Those are hard facts inside a legal arena. So when you ask what this means, it means we are staring at a scenario the country has barely ever faced. The possibility of the first criminal conviction of a former president, or a president fighting that level of prosecution while trying to hold office again. That would create constitutional tension, political chaos, and a legitimacy crisis on all sides. And that is why this Bedminster tape is not just another headline. It is the kind of evidence that changes the temperature of everything around it, legal, political, institutional, and cultural. Because once a case reaches the point where the defendant's own words appear to establish key elements, the argument stops being, did it happen, and becomes, what do we do about it? And that is the question America.
Let's say, Mr. President, that you're a creepy billionaire, and it is your plan to capture and control the Supreme Court, to take it over, just like 19th century robber barons would have taken over and captured the railroad commission that set the rates for their own railroad.
Sounds like a pitch for a 1930s black and white movie.
Let's say you sent millions of dollars, secret dollars, to the Federalist Society for it to funnel money to its employee and your operative, Leonard Leo. Let's say that Leonard Leo got his cred with you and your right-wing billionaire pals when he helped you kill the nomination to the Supreme Court of President George W. Bush's friend and White House counsel, Harriet Miers, a political hit job from the far right against a Republican president's nominee, which produced none other than Sam Alito.
Okay, this doesn't sound like it's going to have a Mr. Smith goes to Washington happy ending.
Let's say you also sent millions of dollars to Leonard Leo's Judicial Crisis Network, a fictitious name front group for another front group operating out of the same hallway, on the same floor, in the same building as the Federalist Society. Let's say you sent Judicial Crisis Network secret millions of dollars, checks as big as $15 million, checks as big as $17 million to run ads against Merrick Garland, to help Mitch McConnell block his confirmation by the Senate. Let's say that for your millions of dollars to the Federalist Society, the Federalist Society allowed you to use its name on a list of Supreme Court nominees that you and your right-wing billionaire pals and Leonard Leo cooked up. A list that the Federalist Society never considered or approved, never an agenda item, never a vote, but a list from some back room of the Federalist Society, pulled together by Leo and the billionaires, that candidate Trump promised to follow. And let's say that when Trump kept that promise and nominated your chosen ones, you sent millions more to the Judicial Crisis Network and to Mitch McConnell's political operation, not just to stop Merrick Garland, but to push the confirmation of your chosen ones, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. And let's say that to keep your chosen ones loyal and happy and entertained, you secretly paid for their personal lives. You paid for family tuitions. You bought family houses and let family members live rent-free. You paid for lifestyles of the rich and famous level vacations, including free travel to resorts on private jets, travel on private yachts, and you gave them expensive gifts, and you directed money to their spouses, and of course you hung out with them. And let's say that that last part, keeping them loyal and happy and entertained with all those gifts, was illegal. Illegal. Let's say that your loyalty gifts program required the chosen ones to file false federal disclosure forms and perhaps even false tax returns. Let's say that your loyalty gifts program might put you in trouble with the tax man for claiming false business expenses. How could that be? Let's say